Have you ever looked at a community and just, wondered how everything fits together, their culture, their beliefs, even the land they live on, how it all seems tangled up?
Mm.
Or maybe, how do ancient traditions keep going? How do they survive, even evolve, when the world around them changes so fast?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question.
Well, today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that.
Mhm.
We're going to explore the work of a really key figure in Indian anthropology, Lalita Prasad Vidyarthi.
A giant in the field, truly.
Absolutely. And our mission today is to unpack two of his biggest ideas. Really eye-opening stuff. The sacred complex and the nature-man-spirit complex.
Two concepts that offer such rich ways of seeing.
Exactly. And by the end of this exploration, you'll hopefully have a totally new lens for looking at human societies and how they adapt. Get ready for some, aha moments. We're going to connect some dots you might not expect.
Sounds great.
Okay, but before we jump into those big ideas, let's just get a sense of the person behind them. Who was Lalita Prasad Vidyarthi? What shaped his thinking?
Right. Well, LP Vidyarthi is, as I said, a foundational name. He was born back in 1931 near Patna in India.
Okay.
His journey started at Lucknow University, studying under D.N. Majumdar, another important figure. But what's really interesting is where he went next.
Oh.
He earned his PhD in 1958 but from Chicago University, and he worked there with some real heavyweights, Soltax, who was a pioneer of action anthropology, and Robert Redfield, famous for his work on folk societies.
Wow, Chicago. So India and the U.S., that's quite a combination of influences.
It really is. And that blend shaped his whole approach. You see, Vidyarthi wasn't just an academic observer. His life's work was deeply rooted in applied anthropology, using this knowledge to tackle real-world problems and action anthropology, which is all about working with communities.
So hands-on stuff.
Very much so. And his impact was huge. He was instrumental in building the anthropology department at Ranchi University, getting major funding, making it a center of advanced study. And importantly, he really helped put Indian anthropology on the global stage, making sure international journals and scholars recognized the work coming out of India.
That's fascinating. So that mix of experiences studying traditional communities in India, then being exposed to cutting-edge American anthropology, it must have given him a unique perspective.
Absolutely. It sounds like he wasn't just interested in describing cultures. He wanted to understand how they worked, how they functioned as living systems.
And how that understanding could actually be used.
Exactly. He saw anthropology as a tool for understanding societies in all their complexity, not just as, exhibits in a museum. And that practical, holistic view, that's crucial for understanding his big concepts.
Right. Okay, let's get into the first one then. You mentioned how places hold meaning. Vidyarthi's concept of the sacred complex. This sounds really interesting. Where did it come from? What's the core idea?
Yeah, this is probably one of his most famous contributions. It came directly out of some really intensive field work he did in the sacred city of Gaya in India.
Gaya.
All his findings, his big insights, went into his 1961 book, Sacred Complex in Hindu Gaya. What he essentially did was he broke down the spiritual life of a city, made it understandable piece by piece.
When did you do that?
He proposed that this sacred complex has three essential parts. They're all interconnected. First up is sacred geography.
Sacred geography, like a spiritual map.
Exactly like that. Think about mapping the holy landscape. So Gaya, for instance, was seen as a kshetra. Now, that's not just a physical place. It's more like a sacred field or territory. It's imbued with something special.
Okay.
And within this big map, he found smaller units kind of nested inside each other. You start with the smallest thing, a sacred center. Could be tiny, a single image, a specific spot on a river, one temple, even a particular tree that's considered holy.
Right, very specific points.
Then you might have several of these sacred centers close together, maybe around a main temple or shrine. That forms a sacred cluster.
Okay, grouping them up.
And then it keeps expanding. A couple of clusters make up a sacred segment. Several segments form a sacred zone, which might cover the whole holy area.
It's like those Russian nesting dolls, but for sacred spaces.
That's a perfect analogy. Each one nested inside the next larger sacred space. And it makes you think, doesn't it, about the sacred geography in our own lives or communities, even if they aren't formal religious sites. Where are those places we treat with special reverence? Places that just feel important.
That's a really good point. So you've got these special places mapped out. What happens in them?
Well, that leads straight to the second component, sacred performances. These are all the rituals, the activities, everything people do in those sacred spaces.
Okay, the actions.
Right. In Gaya, he observed all sorts of things. Arti, that beautiful ceremony with lamps. Havan, the fire rituals. Japam, which is chanting, yagna, larger offerings, recitations, bathing in the sacred river, prayers, meditations, all of it.
A whole range of activities.
Yes. And crucially, these aren't just, empty motions. Vidyarthi showed how these performances actually reflect the social structure of the people doing them.
How so?
Well, think about it. Who gets to participate? Maybe certain families have always done specific roles for generations, or perhaps particular offerings are linked to certain social groups. The ritual itself becomes like a living map of the community's hierarchy, their relationships, their shared beliefs.
Interesting. So the rituals aren't just religious acts in isolation. They actually mirror the society itself. Okay, so you have places, you have actions. Who guides all this?
And that's the third piece of the puzzle, the sacred specialists. These are the experts, the priests, the monks, maybe sacred singers, reciters. In Gaya, it was the Gaya wall Brahmins.
Ritual leaders.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating here, Vidyarthi pointed out, is how these specialists act like a bridge, a crucial link.
A bridge between what?
Between what he called the great tradition and the little traditions. The great tradition is sort of the big, classical, widespread religious texts and practices you find across a whole civilization. Think scriptures, major deities, pan-Indian rituals.
Okay, the standardized stuff.
Right. And the little traditions are the more local, folk-level practices, the village customs, local deities, the things specific to rural populations.
Got it. So the specialists connect these two levels.
Precisely. They transmit elements of the great tradition down to the local level. But, and this is key, they don't just pass things on rigidly. They often adapt or modify texts and rituals to fit local needs or even societal changes. They make tradition a living, breathing thing.
So they're like cultural translators almost, making the big ideas relevant locally.
That's a great way to put it, yes.
Okay, so we have sacred geography, sacred performances, and sacred specialists. It's not just a list, though, right? When you put them all together, what's the bigger picture? What does the sacred complex actually show us?
That's the core of it. Vidyarthi's main hypothesis, his big idea, was that the sacred complex shows this constant interplay. There's continuity, yes, traditions carry on, but there's also compromise and combination between the great and little traditions.
Okay, so they influence each other.
Constantly.
Yeah.
He used the image of different rivers flowing into one big sea. People from all sorts of backgrounds with different local customs, they come together at these sacred sites. They share in the larger traditions. And that very act of coming together, that shared experience, it actually helps build a sense of broader unity, an integrated cultural pattern. In India's case, even national unity.
That's powerful. Shared ritual creating shared identity.
Exactly. And he also noticed something else in Gaya, something really telling about how these complexes aren't static.
What was that?
He observed that because of modern influences, tourism, changing economies, the secular zone of the city was actually expanding. Areas for hotels, restaurants, parks for pilgrims.
Right.
While the purely sacred zone seemed to be maybe slightly shrinking or changing its nature.
So the complex itself was adapting to the modern world.
Precisely. It showed that these complexes are always in process. They transform, they modify, they respond. Tradition isn't frozen.
That's a really important point. Tradition is a living thing. Did other researchers find similar things elsewhere? Did this sacred complex idea hold up in other places besides Gaya?
Oh, absolutely. And that's what really showed the strength of the concept. Its ability to explain similar dynamics in different contexts was key.
Like where?
Well, for instance, Makhan Shah did a study in Janakpur in Nepal. And his work beautifully illustrated how a civilization's cultural reach, its boundary, isn't always the same as a nation's political border. Sacred sites can connect people across those lines.
Interesting. So culture transcends politics sometimes.
Definitely. And then there was B.N. Saraswati's fantastic work on Kashi, that's Varanasi. He showed that a sacred complex isn't just about the elite, the Brahmin traditions. It often includes non-Brahmin shrines, local performances, reflecting a much bigger, more inclusive organization of traditions.
So it's broader than just the high church version.
Much broader. And Saraswati also studied Panaji in Goa, highlighting again how communities manage to blend their traditions, their cultural continuity, with modern changes, just like Vidyarthi saw in Gaya.
So what these examples seem to tell us is that human traditions are actually pretty flexible, pretty adaptive. They find ways to incorporate new things while still holding on to their core.
That's a great summary of it. They're resilient and dynamic.
Okay, wow. That's a really deep dive into sacred spaces.
Yeah.
Now, let's shift gears a bit. You mentioned another cornerstone of Vidyarthi's work, the Nature-Man-Spirit Complex. This sounds like it connects a different set of dots entirely. Where did this one come from?
Right, this concept emerged from another incredibly detailed immersive study Vidyarthi conducted. This time it was with the Sauria Paharia tribe. They're also known as the Malers, living in the hills of Bihar in the Sahibganj district.
Mailers, okay.
His findings were published in his 1963 book, The Mailer, Nature-Man-Spirit Complex in a Hill Tribe of Bihar. And his aim here was, again, very holistic. He wanted to capture the very soul of their culture, not just list their customs.
And how did he approach that? What are the components?
He identified three elements again, but this time focused on the ecological and spiritual basis of their life. These three are nature, man, and spirit, and they are profoundly intertwined.
Okay, let's break those down. Nature.
Nature, for the Malers, basically means their immediate environment, specifically the hills and the forests they inhabit. Their entire existence, their survival, their livelihood is just completely dependent on the forest.
In what ways?
Everything. They practice shifting cultivation, they call it kalu. They gather food directly from the forest roots, fruits, you name it. They collect fuel, medicinal herbs, materials for crafts. The forest is where they hunt, where they get timber for their homes. It's even where they gather, where courtship happens, where they bury their dead.
Wow. So the forest is everything. Their supermarket, their pharmacy, their hardware store, their community center.
Exactly. It's all encompassing. How could such a deep connection not shape every single part of your life, from how you eat to how you build your house to maybe even how you think about the world?
It seems obvious when you put it like that. So how does that deep dependence on nature influence the man part, their social life?
Well, that's the man component. This is about their social institutions, family, marriage, the way society is organized. And what Vidyarthi found was that their social structure was relatively simple. It seemed adapted directly to those basic needs dictated by the forest environment. Primarily getting food and, well, continuing the group reproduction.
Simple in what way?
For example, kinship wasn't traced back endlessly. Usually only about 3 generations mattered for practical purposes. They didn't have a very elaborate clan system like some other groups. It makes sense, right? If you live in relatively small, self-sufficient groups relying on forest resources, maybe a very complex, hierarchical social structure isn't necessary or even possible. The environment shapes the social patterns.
Okay, so the way they live together is directly linked to how they live off the land.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And where does spirit fit into this picture?
The third component is spirit. This refers to their whole world of beliefs about the supernatural, about spirits. Vidyarthi described the Malers as living with ceaseless anxieties connected to spirits they call Gasayans.
Gasans. Are these like gods or?
More like active forces, spirits that inhabit the world around them and directly influence things. They aren't abstract deities up in the sky. They're seen as being right there, affecting the harvest, causing illness, bringing good fortune, or causing disaster.
So very present, very real forces in their daily lives.
Extremely. Some Gasayans are seen as good, benevolent, they might bring health or wealth. Others are malevolent, causing sickness, crop failure, even death. The Malers believe these Gasayans guide their destiny and they must be appeased constantly through rituals, offerings, showing respect.
It sounds like every aspect of life is woven through with this belief.
That's exactly what Vidyarthi found. Every moment, from building a house to planting a crop to dealing with illness, seems to involve considering a Gasayan. It demands constant awareness and ritual action.
So it's not just nature, man, spirit as separate boxes, is it? You keep saying intertwined. It's how they constantly interact.
Precisely. That was Vidyarthi's most profound insight with this model. It's not just that these three things exist side by side, it's that nature and spirit deeply, fundamentally influence and shape the man part, the social structure.
They know that.
Yes. They're like threads woven together so tightly in a tapestry, you can't pull one out without affecting the others. His approach really highlighted the ecological basis of their culture, how their physical world and their spiritual world together create their entire social reality. One simply cannot exist or be understood without the others.
That's a truly holistic perspective. It really forces you to see the connections.
Yeah.
So how useful is this concept? I mean, beyond understanding the Maler, can it help us understand other groups or even tackle real-world problems today?
Oh, hugely useful. That's where its real power lies, I think. First, as an analytical tool, it's been remarkably effective. People have used this nature-man-spirit framework successfully to study many other tribal groups like the Korwa, the Nickaburis, the Saliga, and some argue it even helps understand aspects of peasant and modern societies too. It shows its broad applicability.
So it travels well conceptually.
It does. But maybe even more importantly, it provides crucial guidance for applied anthropology, especially when it comes to development projects or interventions among tribal communities.
How so?
Well, it helps explain something often quite baffling to outsiders, why some communities might resist changes that seem on the surface beneficial, why they might push back against radical changes or rehabilitation efforts.
Right. The intervention might look good on paper,
But it might be completely disrupting the delicate, long-established balance of their nature-man-spirit complex. It might cut them off from the force they depend on, nature, force changes in family structure, man, or disregard their spiritual beliefs and practices.
which could cause huge problems, even if unintended.
Exactly. So the concept tells applied anthropologists, development workers, policymakers, be incredibly sensitive, be receptive to how changes might threaten this equilibrium. It's about aiming for, as some have put it, development with happiness, ensuring that welfare schemes actually benefit the community on their own terms without causing deep disruption.
It really underscores that little traditions, these integrated ways of life, are incredibly resilient, and they might even reject parts of great traditions or modern ideas if they just don't fit their worldview.
That's a perfect way to put it. And it raises that critical question, doesn't it? How vital is it to truly understand a community's core beliefs, their relationship with their environment, their social fabric, before you try to help them or introduce change?
It seems absolutely fundamental. Otherwise, you risk doing more harm than good.
Precisely. And, P.K. Singh took this idea even further. He suggested this nature-man-spirit complex isn't just for tribal or traditional societies. He saw it as a kind of underlying constant in human culture.
A constant. How our relationship with nature has changed so much with technology.
True. Our direct dependence on raw nature might decrease for many of us. We aren't all shifting cultivators anymore. But, Singh argued, our dependence on other people, on complex social structures, economies, information networks, actually increases massively.
Okay. So the balance shifts.
The balance shifts, but the fundamental equation that culture is this product of how we relate to our environment, however modified, our social structures, man, and our beliefs or meaning systems, spirit, that core interconnectedness remains. It just looks different. It invites us to think about how our complex societies today still reflect these intertwined relationships.
That's a fascinating extension of the idea. What an incredible journey through these two frameworks. Okay, let's maybe do a quick recap just to lock these ideas in. If you had to quickly summarize the two big concepts from Vidyarthi we explored today.
Okay, quick recap. First, we talked about the sacred complex. Remember that came out of his study of Gaya. And its essence is how sacred geography, the places, sacred performances, the rituals, and sacred specialists, the leaders, all weave together. It shows this dynamic interplay, continuity, compromise, adaptation between the great and little traditions, and how it's always changing over time.
Got it. Sacred complex,
Yeah.
places, performances, people, connecting big and small traditions, always evolving.
Perfect. Then, second, we explored the nature-man-spirit complex. This one came from his deep study of the Malur tribe.
We're forest dwellers.
Exactly. And this concept highlights that profound, absolutely inseparable connection between their environment, nature, their social life, man, and their spiritual beliefs, spirit. It's a vital tool for understanding cultural adaptation and, crucially, for guiding development work that is sensitive and truly beneficial.
Nature-man-spirit. Environment, society, beliefs, all deeply linked. Crucial for understanding adaptation and sensitive development. Okay. And if you had to boil down the core message, the lasting impact of Vidyarthi's contribution overall, what did he teach us?
I think his enduring legacy is teaching us to look at societies not as collections of separate facts or parts, but as integrated, living, dynamic systems.
Holistic systems.
Yes, where everything, the land, the beliefs, the social interactions constantly shapes everything else. He gave us these powerful frameworks to see beyond just the surface, to try and understand the soul of cultures, the connections that make them work.
Seeing the soul of cultures. I
Yeah.
like that. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the takeaway for you, our listener? Here's a thought to mull over. In our world today, changing so fast, so globalized, how can understanding these deep, ancient, interconnected complexes like the sacred complex and nature-man-spirit help us? How can it help us appreciate the incredible resilience and beauty of diverse cultures? and maybe, just maybe, help us foster development that is truly sustainable and truly happy for communities everywhere.
A really important question for our times.
Indeed. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. We really hope you feel a bit more informed and maybe your curiosity has been sparked. Join us next time for another deep dive into fascinating topics.